This is a brief discussion of some of Ortega y Gasset's ideas from his essay In Search of the Goethe Within. And Goethe was a German author, but the idea is, trying to find what's best in us and achieving our best possibilities. Uh, there's a fill in the blank. Ortega says life is essentially a drama because it's a desperate struggle with things and even with our character to succeed in being, in fact, that which we are in design. And so, what this underscores is this existentialist notion of the calling. And there's, so there's, what does that possibly mean, to succeed in being, in fact, that which we are in design? Well, for the existentialist, it means to kind of achieve our best possible self and to kind of create a goal or a series of goals and to what negotiate life in such a way which is vital and dynamic and in ways that have to do with development and achievement. What is persistent depression? Well, this is what Ortega says, and I think it's very interesting and super timely. Persistent depression is only too clearly a sign that a man is living contrary to his vocation. And I think that's a bad translation. I think what Ortega, he's a Spanish philosopher, really meant, and this would be in line with like Emerson and Heidegger and Viktor Frankl. Uh, it it is the idea of a calling, and this calling is super metaphysical, and this idea that you as a person were kind of meant to do one thing. Like there's one thing out there that is sort of possible for you and it's beckoning. It's kind of a call to what you could become. And whether that like everybody's there. Some people, their call is to become a preacher, or others a teacher, or perhaps a professional athlete, or a great musician, or something like that. And so this idea is, uh, do you have the courage to heed your call, which summons you to your best possible self, right? And that's why this idea, where he asserts persistent depression is only too clearly a sign that a man is living contrary to his vocation or his calling, I think, is fascinating. What does Ortega mean that a consciousness of security kills life? What happens to aristocracies? Um, and this is what Ortega says. He says, life is our reaction to the basic insecurity which constitutes its substance. Hence, it's an extremely serious matter for a man to find himself too much surrounded by apparent securities. A consciousness of security kills life. Herein lies the cause of the regularly recurring degeneration of aristocracies. So aristocracies are like those richy riches who have too much comfort. And so what he's saying here, right? What Ortega is saying in this fascinating little quote is that to have life too comfortable, to have it too easy, to be in too great a sense of security really kills what it means to be a person, right? And that like life itself is about manifesting a kind of anxiety which provokes us. Like, I mean, this idea of anxiety and guilt, right? Guilt that if you don't do your best, you're going to feel bad about it, right? And prior to, say, studying for an exam, you start to get anxious, right? You start to feel uncomfortable. And then if you don't do what you could have done, then you feel guilty about it. I mean, he would say depressed. I mean, this idea that we can't have it too easy, that we have to challenge ourselves. What is the characteristic of youth faced with maturity, feeling that he has everything potentially, he supposes what? And so here, right, this is the idea. I'll just give you a foreshadowing. I mean, when you're young, you think that everything's possible. And you have these delusions that, the time is not fleeting and moving quickly. And so there's this confusion between potential and actual. I mean, that's the problem for the youth. They think that the two are the same. So here, I'll read this. Ortega Gasset asserts life consists in giving up the state of availability. Mere availability is the characteristic of youth faced with maturity. The youth, because he is not anything determinate and irrevocable, is everything potentially. Herein lies his charm and his insolence, or his kind of arrogance. Feeling that he is everything potentially, he supposes that he is everything actually. And so, right, the youth hasn't really had a calling yet, right? So I mean, the youth doesn't exactly know what he or she should be, and so there's this tendency to think that they could be anything. But as the days move on, if you don't make a choice and work towards your goal, you're, this whole idea of everything potentially could turn into nothing, actually. uh, what saps the resources of life, right? What kind of kills the resources of life? And again, you see this theme of having too much comfort. So Ortega says this, he says, nothing so saps the profound resources of a life as finding life too easy, right? And so that is this idea that you really need to challenge yourself and put your nose to the grindstone and work really hard and figure out what you want to do, create goals, create promises, and be resolute. Resolve to fulfill your promises to yourself, because if it's too easy, it's not going to be good. What's the difference between effort and activity, according to Ortega Gasset? He says this, he says, an effort is only effort when it begins to hurt. Anything else is activity, effortless effort, right? So he's differentiating effort, which is painful, uh, an activity, which is not painful. It's not painful for you to kind of sit and watch television, and it's not painful to play Fortnite. But if you really want to grow, if you really want to cultivate, right, you need to rip yourself away from your modern mass communication comfort technologies and do yourself some legitimate suffering for a cause that would be meaningful to you. And so suffering for a cause could be like, I don't know, going to the gym and lifting weights, or reading a book that is exceedingly challenging for you, and whereby you had to look up all kinds of new words. And how about trying to learn a foreign language or even a musical instrument or something like that? I mean, that is not easy. It can be very painful, very challenging. So, there you go. That is a brief discussion of Jose Ortega y Gasset's ideas from his essay, The Goethe Within.